Yes.
And
Yeah.
thank you.
However, do we have any actual action items on this agenda?
Just approving the minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
you could move as a committee of the whole and take it out of order.
I would, let's give a few more minutes, folks, given the weather. And it's a relatively light agenda. I don't think we'll be pushing. And here we are. Our chair is here at 9 o'clock, right on time.
Yay.
That rain was unexpected.
Yeah.
We're waiting on one more for a quorum.
Oh, good.
Luis is on his way.
Okay.
I haven't heard from Ariana or
How's everybody?
Dave or Dave Chico.
Okay,
Good morning.
good morning. Apologize for being late.
Director Worthy, you can either switch name tags or.
Am I in the wrong spot? Thank you.
Whichever is your.
Shows it's Monday after daylight savings time. That is part of the issue.
The board, you could vote as Ariana.
Yeah, probably not a good idea. To turn off my phone, that was something I wanted to do.
No boards on Zoom today.
No one's on Zoom today. Not officially anyway. Not anyone will be able to vote.
I'd like to say that Michelle did a good job on council meeting.
Yeah, she heard that she reported back, that
job.
you spoke very eloquently on our behalf as well. We appreciate that.
That's not eloquent. I just make stuff up.
Well, there you go. 97.825% of statistics are made up on the spot. It's an impressive number. I just made it up.
Proof of point, how I run it.
So we know for sure that
We know for sure that Luis is on the way and he's stuck in traffic, although we can move ahead with the presentations and take the approval of the minutes until we get a quorum established. We do have our state and federal lobbyists on the line
Right.
to make a presentation to us. So it's at your pleasure, Chair.
Well. See here, let's wait
Okay,
2 more minutes.
that's fine.
Let's do that, just see what happens.
Some unexpected weather this morning.
Yeah,
It's only it's just 9:03. So
yes, exactly. And it's funny, I looked at my weather app before I left and it didn't show any sign of rain, and then all of a sudden I got to a certain spot.
Oh, so it wasn't raining at your place?
Yeah.
Oh, it
No.
started raining last night in our house.
Yeah, no rain at our house at all, none. So, but I looked at Monterey too, and of course, now I'm sure it's gonna show that it's raining everywhere. So crazy. Yeah, see, it still says mostly cloudy.
You have Monterey, California or Monterey, Tennessee?
No, I have Monterey,
Okay,
California.
just check.
There's Monterey, Tennessee.
There is, I
Yeah,
think,
there is.
yeah.
there's a Carmel.
There's a Carmel,
Couple.
Indiana.
Yeah.
I believe there's a Monterey, Tennessee.
Of course, it is a microclimate, so you just never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
Comes through pretty hard sometimes, and
Mhm.
like that freaky weather last week where Prunedale got hit.
Really?
Mhm.
How did that go, by the way, with
Yeah.
the buses? I know we got the thing from from Carl that they sent the buses, that you sent the buses to Ferndale,
Yeah, we did. They ended up not
having to utilize.
having to use them though. Which got me to thinking, where I'm working with the state DMV to see if we can get some of their data, basically the address of everyone who has a placard, disabled placard, and labeled, throw that into our GIS system so that when we are called on an emergency, we'll know in advance. Do we have someone there? Because they had us come and deploy our buses to the area, and then they went house to house saying, does anybody need help? Well, it might be better if we knew in advance
Where
whether
you
there's,
really need to go to,
whether
yeah.
there's a placard holder there or not.
Yeah.
We might still need it, but
Mhm.
anyway, we'll see.
Seems like a smarter approach.
I never saw any video of the north side or Watsonville Potter, but I did see. I can't remember the boulevard that it's off of 101 in Prudale.
Yeah, Ralph Lane.
That little housing area,
Yeah.
there was like 20-25 homes.
That's where we were called out to,
Okay.
and it's kind of, they didn't declare an emergency, but I guess they were significantly underwater. But a lot of the folks who live out there, they have, vehicles that handle that sort of thing.
Mhm.
They may not have sheetrock in their house to handle it.
That's true, but a bus can't help you there.
No.
We are at past 9:05.
Right, I think we should just begin.
Okay,
All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Board Administrative Performance Committee. Do we have any public comments on matters not on the agenda?
Madam Chair, maybe we take the roll call first.
Okay, yeah, you're right. So I'm gonna wait today. And Jeanette, will you please call me
Yes, City of Gonzales,
here?
City of Seaside. Absent, City of West Greenfield. City of Monterey,
Present.
City of Delray Oaks,
Here.
County of Monterey.
on their way.
Okay, since we cannot, since at this time we do not have a quorum, we will move on to action items. Item number 4, review of monthly report. Or do you want to skip that and move on to the legislative?
Madam Chair, maybe start with public comment on matters not on the agenda.
Okay, sorry. I apologize, everyone. Public comments not on the agenda. Is there anyone from the public that has a public comment? Anyone in the audience? No. Do we have anyone on Zoom? Doesn't appear so. So I'll close public comment. And move forward, since we need to skip the minutes at this time. Carl?
Sure.
Review of monthly report.
Yep. So on page 1 of the monthly report, or on the general manager's report, there's a summary. And it's great to report that the gains that we saw throughout the first year of the Better Bus Network, which started in December of 2022, as we roll into January, we're looking at January of 2024 results. Even though we had 20% plus increase from 23 over 22, we're having even a 24% increase in 24 over 23. So it was not a one-time shot of increasing the ridership, and now we're holding steady or dropping off. We're continuing to increase at an increasing rate. That's all good. Our on-time percentage is close to 90% and 89% on-time performance. And we've also seen significant, we're maintaining an on-time percentage, a comparable on-time percentage with the MST rides paratransit system, which some time ago had been an issue, but that's all reflective of, the ability for us to be hiring more employees on the MST rides with our contractor. And as you saw, there's a number of reports from the media in this packet. We got a ton of news coverage for our hiring, and the board members who volunteered to go out and drive a vehicle that generated all sorts of news, and we still have a very large class in place. We started with 23. And I think we're down to, 21, maybe. We've had one person after a couple weeks on the course just was not able to get comfortable driving the big bus, but they were interested in driving a small bus. So we turned them over to MV and said, hey, we have someone who's passed all the background checks and everything we need to, physicals and everything we need to be a bus driver. We can turn them over to them. You'll have on your full agenda a more detailed report from our planning manager, Emma Patel, on the Better Bus Network. So that the full board will be getting a full report on what the last year's results were on that. So that concludes my overview of the last month's performance. Be happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions at this time?
Where does it bring us for overall filling in vacancies? Where are we at with this? If everyone were to come out of that class,
We'll be at 100%.
Okay. Awesome.
And then we have another class scheduled. We're hiring to start in April. And then we'll be at that point just maintaining for normal attrition. We predict a half a dozen retirements between now and the end of the calendar year. So, we'll look to hire another small class and be back, hopefully back on a more normal training program. So this really got us out from under the basically from under the crisis that we were having. And later on the full board agenda, under the general manager's reports, I do acknowledge the team of professionals. There were about 18 different MST staff members from senior management to frontline supervision that took part in modifying and really just breaking down our whole recruitment, hiring, and training processes and put it back together again in a way that we were able to bring people on board quicker. And that's the key thing. We were sometimes waiting months between someone submitting their application and them actually starting the class, and we were able to drop that down into weeks for some. So I wanted to acknowledge those folks here to the board later in the meeting if we have time.
Great. Do you have any idea how many might be submitting for the April class yet?
I do not.
Okay.
I don't have anyone here that I think is close to that. Lisa, are you? I thought of Melissa handling that, but do you have an idea? I didn't want to put you on the spot. But
Kelly Halkin, Director of Human Resources and Risk. Yeah, we've gotten in about 15 to 20 applications. So the focus has been on the new class and then pivoting. So it took us about 2 weeks just to in-process everyone. Getting all the paperwork in, and I know that they are working on that. So while we even had this new class, we had to cut off at some point of bringing people in. We got a ton of applications and they were still streaming in. So about probably 5 or 7 of those are from this last big class of people that we just couldn't get to them fast enough. Yeah.
Well, that's really a horrible thing to have happen, that you have too many people.
yeah,
So that's a good thing.
it's a good thing.
Well,
Yeah,
great.
there's only so many we can take in at once,
Mhm.
and even still, I mean, we created a new position in the training department to increase our throughput. Our operations department, pitched in and helped out. That's why we wanted to recognize it, because it was a cross-departmental, all hands on deck. We met last February, had a brainstorming session, came up with some ideas, set some goals, and that we are going to have a net 10 increase of drivers, and we exceeded that. So it's great when a plan comes
Comes
together.
together, yeah, great.
Question. So now with the full complement of coach drivers, if everyone finishes, What do you see the output for that? How is that gonna look for the Better Bus Network?
We are currently, in the I'm assuming, Luis is stuck on Highway 1, as most people are. One of the impacts that we're seeing with the increased traffic on Highway 1 is we are missing, about 20% of the transfer times, on the line 20, our busiest line, making the transfer points in Monterey for people to transfer to get to jobs in Carmel or Pacific Grove or elsewhere. And so we experienced that just on Friday. A team of us went out with a group from Marina to talk about the surf, and we took them on the line 20 from Marina to Monterey. And we got caught in terrible traffic on what was supposed to be a relatively light Friday traffic. And we missed the connection. We were with regular passengers, so we were able to see this is the impact. People are missing their connections. They're asking the drivers. It's creating stress for the driver. So we will be putting in additional drivers into the mix on the line 20 so that we can increase frequency there.
Good.
And then that's the first.
Yeah.
Plan.
Good.
That.
All right, great to hear. Hello, Louise, good morning. We were just talking about the traffic and we figured you got stuck in it,
Never a
so.
friend.
There were also, I forgot to mention, there were also some routes that the Better Bus Network contemplated being operated by MST that we didn't have enough drivers for, so we had them contracted out to MB. So we may bring those trips back to be operated by MST directly with large buses versus small buses. So that's the other piece that will happen with the newer influx of drivers as we get this class in and then the next class in. Yeah.
Good.
Very good. All right, since we currently have a quorum now, I would like to go back to the consent agenda if possible.
I would just recommend before closing out that item to go for public comment.
Okay, is there any public comment on the last item discussed? No public comment? Anybody on Zoom? No, nobody that I see. So I'd like to close public comment and move forward to the consent agenda. Item number 3.1, approved minutes of the Board Administrative Performance Committee on December 11th.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first and a second, a move and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, moving on to item number 4.2, receive state legislative advocacy update. And that would be Michelle Obermeyer.
Good morning,
morning.
committee members. Michelle Overmeyer, Director of Planning and Innovation. Page 87 of the full agenda package has the written report. And then we're joined virtually by our state legislative advocates in Sacramento to give you an update on more current events going on there. So we have Matt Robinson and Michael Pimentel.
Hey, folks, good morning. Let me just see. I was getting, Michelle, for whatever reason, the system is prohibiting us from showing video, so hopefully audio will work in the meantime. Good to see everybody. I know you can't see us, but we did see you at the end of 2023. We reported at that time that there were a few two-year bills that we were keeping an eye on, and for what it's worth, the legislature had until the end of January to hear and move two-year bills from one house to the other. There was one particular bill that MST had on its tracking sheet, AB 817, which dealt with the Brown Act and allowing some remote meeting options for advisory bodies of local governments. That bill did move over from the Assembly to the Senate and is awaiting its first hearing in the Senate. Recently, about a little less than a month ago, we had the introduction deadline for bills for consideration in the second year of the two-year session. So new bills in 2024, if you will. And by February 16th, there were about 2,500 bills that were introduced. And a number of those bills start out as spot bills or intent bills, meaning they don't really have substance in them. They either make a small tweak to a code section or state the intent of the particular member of the legislature to do something with the bill in a particular area. It is sort of a no man's land for a bit, but today, actually, in the assembly is the spot bill deadline. So we should start to see a lot of legislation that is currently in a spot bill form be substantive in the days ahead. In the Senate, they have a bit more time. Their spot bill amendment deadline is the 20th of this month. So by the beginning of April, we should know the lay of the land pretty clearly. And having said that, committee hearings are starting for those bills that do have substance or had substance out of the gate, if you will. The policy committees should be ramping up here for the next 2 months or so as we work towards the end of April deadline for policy committees to move bills over to the fiscal committees and get things on their way to the floors and then ultimately into the other house if they're successful. We are tracking several bills for MST. Michael will touch on one or two of those in a moment. But in the meantime, we did want to note some movement in the Senate. We had a new President Pro Tem sworn in on February 5th. And that is Senate President Pro Tem Mike McGuire, who is from the North Bay area all the way up to the Oregon coast. So his district, if you're visualizing the state, starts at the Golden Gate Bridge and pretty much hugs the entire west coast to the Oregon border. So it's a pretty large district. It's also a pretty rural district. I think the largest city in his district is Santa Rosa, but there are no major urban areas in the Senate President Pro Tem's district, which is interesting because now we have leaders in both houses that do not have large cities in their districts and represent more rural areas and larger districts. So it'll be interesting to see how they prioritize issues that are important to those areas of the state. Some of the big committees that changed hands after the announcement of the new pro tem include the Transportation Committee with Senator Cortese from just up the road in Santa Clara County taking the gavel in transportation. We also saw Senator Caballero, who used to represent the county, but her district shifted slightly to the east in redistricting. She now has the gavel in Senate Appropriations. Some argue that's the most powerful committee in the Senate. So nice to see her take the reins there. As far as the Senate Budget Committee is concerned, we have Senator Scott Wiener heading the Senate Budget Committee, moving over from housing to budget. That's important because in the year that is pretty dire in terms of the state's fiscal situation, we talked a lot about that when we were down there, projecting deficits anywhere from 40 billion up to 73 billion if you're with the governor of the LAO. It will be critical to have someone like Senator Wiener heading the Senate Budget Committee when we are trying to preserve the remaining appropriations of that transit funding that we have briefed you on multiple times throughout 2023. And just in case you are a bean counter, we are looking at $2 billion in TRCP funding that needs to be secured and about another 800 million or so in the zero emission transit capital program funding over the next few years that needs to be secured. So someone like Senator Wiener there fighting the fight to retain that funding is going to be critical for transit operators throughout the state. It is a tough budget year, as we mentioned, and so I think everything is on the table. And I think transit is one of those things that the legislature is going to be looking at, whether or not they decide to maintain those general fund commitments or try to shift funding from elsewhere in order to keep those commitments and the expenditure plans that have been sent to CalSTA intact. Michael will touch a bit on the 125 update in just a moment. But outside of that, we saw some things stay the same. We have Senator Becker, who's overseeing Senate Budget Committee Sub 2 that deals with the resources side of transit. So think about all the zero emission bus funding. And then Senator Wahab actually took over in Senate Sub 5, which oversees sort of the core transportation programs. We have, as we wear our transit hat, been working with those offices for several years on these issues. And so we're hopeful that they will be allies in our efforts to keep transit sustainable in California. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Michael Pimentel, who, assuming he is unmuted, will touch on 125 and then one or two bills that we wanted to just put on your radar screen.
All right. Hey, thank you, Matt. And folks, good to be with you this morning. I'm going to actually take things first with discussion on bills. Want to note for you that within the MST board report that we have provided your staff and the board, what you'll find is there are half a dozen bills that we're tracking on MST's behalf in the coming weeks, particularly as we see the spot bill deadline pass and see new bills amended. We'll be potentially highlighting even more bills for you for some review by staff and potential positions by the committee and then ultimately by the board. One in particular we wanted to flag for you at this early juncture is AB 2719 by the Assembly Transportation Committee Chair Lori Wilson. This is a bill that relates to transit vehicle inspections at the CHP operated commercial way stations. Under current law, buses, if you pass by a way station, are required to pull into that way station under the caveat that that way station has capacity to potentially do passenger offboarding if an issue is spotted with the bus. Now, at this stage, there are only 3 way stations that require the buses to pull in because they have the capacity, but CHP is working with local jurisdictions to build out way stations across the state, which may mean that in the near future, more buses are required to pull into the way stations, creating some challenges for them in terms of on-time performance and really the speed of the transit trip. And so with that, this bill is one that is looking to create an alternative inspection process, just recognizing, of course, we want to respect safety, respect CHP's jurisdiction over safety on the state highway system, but ultimately do recognize that transit ridership can be at times fairly fragile, and having things that impede transit travel in any sense may be something that ultimately discourages transit ridership. And so that is a bill that we'll continue to discuss with your staff, may be ripe for a position sometime in the short term. Now, I also want to touch on, as Matt highlighted, SB 125 implementation. And here there are 2 components that I'll touch on briefly. The first is the review by CalSTA of the short-term financial plans that were submitted by regions across the state to CalSTA by the end of last year. TAMC is one of the regions that submitted the financial plan for your region by the end of the year. CalSTA is in the process now of reviewing those financial plans, and they've indicated that sometime in the month of March, they are likely to begin to send out letters noticing regions of the approval of their financial plan, which will then unlock the funds that are dedicated to your region for pass-through to local entities like MST. I will note that CalSTA has ultimately until April 30th of this year to approve all financial plans. But again, they've indicated an interest and a plan to approve those plans in advance of that April 30th deadline. And so that speaks to year 1 funding. And as Matt noted, we are going to be in a much broader conversation on your behalf, looking at what will be the second year of appropriation from CalSTA down to the regions. That is still subject to approval by the legislature. Now, secondly, did want to touch on the SB 125 Transit Transformation Task Force. As you likely know, CEO Carl Sidorik has a seat on that task force, and it met for its second time on February 29th for really some stage setting for the months ahead. The task force is going to be meeting every other month between now and September 2025, and we'll be working to evaluate strategies and policies to help transit ridership recover, to bring transit agencies onto firmer fiscal footing, and will ultimately be developing a report to the legislature capturing some recommendations from the task force that is due to be submitted to the legislature by October 31st, 2025. So early stages, still, again, very much focused on process, very much focused on schedule and some initial discussion of priorities. But I believe it will be at the April meeting, which is likely to have a new date that will see the broader conversation about how we actually move the process along and begin to review some analysis and early recommendations that may be included within that final report. And so that concludes my update. Matt and I are happy to take questions or comments on any balance of what we discussed today or anything additional that the committee may want to explore. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Does anyone on the committee have any questions for Matt or Michael at this time? No? Anyone from the public have any comments or questions at this time? No? We will close then and move on to item number 4.3, receive federal legislative update. And that would be Carl and Don.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We have Don Gilchrist, our representative in Washington, D.C. present. You have a report on page 83 of the full board packet, item 7.2. There's been a lot of activity in recent days with regard to the federal budget, and Don will give us an update. And I believe there's a PowerPoint that Don was planning to go through, and I see it coming on the screen. Okay, Don, just say next slide when you're ready to go.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the help of the staff to get this up. It does include some information that is late breaking, so that we had to get it to them this morning, and always appreciate that extra effort. Don Gilchrist with Thomas Walters and Associates, and happy to talk with the committee about your federal program. If we go to the next slide, I'll just get right to it. The transportation bill is finally signed into law. This is about 5 months late. It has been a terrible, dysfunctional process, but it turned out reasonably well for MST. The details, some of the details are your federal formula programs at FTA, and the bipartisan infrastructure law funding has been sustained and is untouched. Now, that's not really unexpected, but it's very important because that's the primary ways that you get federal funding. Throughout the process, competitive grant programs were under attack. House Republicans wanted to cut them back by $7 billion. That was mostly turned back. There were still some cuts that were included, but it was really a repudiation of what their House Republicans were trying to do. And we were particularly looking at the capital investment grants program at FTA, because that's very important for your SURF project. Before looking at those in a little bit more detail, I just mentioned that member projects, this is community project funding in the House and congressionally designated spending in the Senate, is included in these bills. So that is still strongly supported by the House and the Senate. We weren't successful in obtaining support for MST's projects this year, but we are already working with our folks on the Hill and with the MST staff to put some proposals together for the next round. If we go to the next slide, please. I just wanted to share a few details about how this played out in terms of the cuts that House Republicans were seeking. If you look at the first line of raise grants, House Republicans were proposing to zero that program out in FY24. The final legislation kind of splits the difference and includes $345 million. And that compares to $800 million that was included last year. Now, it's important to remember that this is only funding from the annual appropriations bill. This does not reflect funding that was enacted in the infrastructure law. And that's why when you look at infra and mega programs, they're really not affected by appropriations because their funding comes from the infrastructure law. Going down to the capital investment grants program at FTA, this was a really important one for us. House Republicans proposed to slash the funding down to $392 million in the appropriations bill. And to a large degree, the capital investment grants program, big winner, because funding was sustained at $2.2 billion. That is a decrease compared to last year, but it's a big reversal at what the House Republicans were trying to do. The bus and bus facilities line reflects general fund supplements that are added to this program. We have been successful over the years in advocating for several $100 million in the legislation. That was one thing that fell by the wayside, and there was no additional bus and bus facilities funding that was added in the annual appropriations process. If we go to the next slide, please. This shows the same information in a slightly different way by combining the two sources of funding. This is annual appropriations plus the infrastructure law. And you can see at the capital investment grants program, there's $1.6 billion of funding that's provided through the infrastructure law. You add that to what was provided in the Appropriations Act, and there's a total of $3.8 billion available for capital investment grants in FY24. And there's a similar process that you go through for each of these programs. Bus and bus facilities programs are sustained at very close to their previous level. The multimodal grants programs do very well. Amtrak comes out very strong because of so much funding that was provided in the infrastructure law. But that's the dynamic that we're working through, is protecting infrastructure law spending, but also trying to add to it in the annual appropriations bills. Next slide, please. So just turning to where that leaves us now, we have to quickly pivot to the next fiscal year. The president's budget is going to the Hill today. It's actually probably already been received. And it's going to be an interesting year. We have to kind of start and do it all over again. We are continuing to see a crisis in the House leadership. You recall last year, Speaker McCarthy was ousted and a new speaker, Speaker Johnson from Louisiana, was installed. He's managing to hold things together, but it's pretty rickety in the House Republican Conference. If you look at the vote on the appropriations bill that was just signed into law, 85 members of the House voted against that. And of those 85, 83 were Republicans. And that means 83 House Republicans voted against their speaker. And that's a very big number, not normally the way the House functions. And so the leadership in the House is continually struggling to maintain control of the floor, and oftentimes having to rely on Democratic votes to accomplish the important things like passing appropriations bills. It's probably not sustainable over the long term. We don't exactly know how it will play out, but it is going to make things a little bit chaotic this year, I think, and we're likely to see a return to the attempts by House Republicans to seek large spending reductions. I think both sides are going to be playing to the audiences in this election year, and we're already expecting delays that will require a lame duck session. So it's going to be a long process. It'll be a difficult process like we just saw, but we do have some hope. The infrastructure law spending provides a strong foundation for these programs, and Congress has not been willing to do anything to interfere with that. And apart from that, we do see a bipartisan support for infrastructure spending in the transportation sectors, the different modes. There's a strong bipartisan majority for this transportation funding in Congress, and that bodes well for the eventual outcome. I think it will be a difficult process along the way, but we have pretty good prospects for seeing a good outcome. This will probably play out until late in the year, at least till the end of December, and it could be somewhat of a repeat of what we saw this year, where it plays out into the early months of 2025. If we just go to the next slide, I just wanted to recap our goals and objectives that we're working on. And first and foremost is protecting that funding that was enacted in the infrastructure law. That provides grant opportunities for you to apply for, and that's something that we can help with, but MST staff takes the lead on that. We are going to be taking another run at obtaining member projects in the appropriations bills. That process is going to be playing out very quickly over the next couple weeks, or at the most a month, I think. And throughout the appropriations process, we'll continue to fight for increased funding for transit programs, especially the bus program, but also keeping a close eye on the New Starts capital investment grants program because of how important it is to the SURF project. I'll just note that we're working with your staff on some meetings for April when they are in town for the APTA Legislative Conference, and we'll be continuing to strategize with them as we get going on these FY25 issues. Next slide, please. I'll conclude there and thank you for the chance to work with you and happy to provide additional responses or answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions from the committee? No? Any questions from the public? No? Thank you so much, Don. Appreciate the
Thank you.
report. All right, moving on to item number 4.4, review MST investment policy. Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lisa Reinheimer, Assistant General Manager for MST. Nice to see everyone on this sort of foggy, rainy day. So at the January strategic meeting, the board asked to have MST bring back the investment policy to the board to take a look at. It was first adopted in 2010 and then revised in 2017. So it's probably time to take a look at it. I've included it as an attachment and included some minor revisions just to tighten it up a little bit, but essentially the types of investments that MST would be allowed to make under the policy are certificates of deposit or CDs, no more than 250,000. That's kind of related to the FDIC limits. So all of these investments are very conservative and don't put MST at significant risk. That number may have changed. I want to take a look at the state has guidance for local agencies on investments. I want to do a more thorough review before we bring it back to the board, probably in June as part of the budget process. But it also includes the local agency investment fund or LAIF that's managed by the state. We currently get 4% interest on about $25 million that we have in there. So, and that's distributed quarterly. We're allowed US Treasury bills as well as investing in our other idle funds to make sure that we're compliant with the state rules. Currently in our money market accounts, we're getting 4.28% APR, and that's on about another $25 million as well. So we're doing quite well in terms of the percentage rates that we're getting compared to, say, 3 years ago. I'm happy to attempt to answer any questions that you may have on this one, but we're bringing it back to you as a first go round and then bring it back to the board in June with the budget.
Right, very good. Thank you. Any questions from anyone?
Thank you for your report. Who is the MST treasurer and deputy treasurer?
Carl and I.
Okay.
We have multiple hats.
Okay. And then how often do you meet to talk about the investments, or do you have is it a particular timeline?
We meet every 2 weeks and, you know, sometimes this is a topic, sometimes it's not, but, you know, we meet as needed. I think you know, we just let the markets will drive when we're having these discussions.
Yeah.
And
it's
we move from LAIF, we move money from LAIF into the money markets, and we'll also bring in our finance manager, Andrea Williams, is also involved in those discussions as well.
And reported to the board monthly.
And we'll get you know, periodically banks will come seeking our business, promising us this or that, and sometimes we'll switch institutions, sometimes we don't. It really just depends. It's been a while since we've switched institutions. Overall, it's not something you take lightly, and if you just chase rates all the time, you end up getting a reputation in the industry, and folks don't want to do business with you. Same things happens in the insurance markets too. You keep on changing your insurances and you get a reputation for not being a good client. They don't offer you the good results all the time. So
Interesting. Thank you. I know what you mean when you say it's much better now than it was 3 years ago. And this is a pretty consistent number from just everything that I've been reading. So, you know, it's conservative, but it works.
it's not nothing.
No, it's better than 0.4% or whatever it was back in the day. Okay, anyone else have any questions?
I got a quick question for our operations. Who is our bank of record?
Oh,
It's Mechanics Bank, and
Okay.
in fact, they just bought out, and I say just because it was 4 years ago. They just bought out Rabobank, which we had a relationship with for a number of years, and because of the buyout, we just stuck with Mechanics, and they've been doing fine for us.
Okay.
They're local, so it makes it easy.
Yeah,
to-
yeah. They are accessible, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
Exactly. Okay, anyone else? No? All right. If there is nothing else, I think we can adjourn the meeting at this time. Thank you all. So we're adjourning.
Okay.
All right.